So nice to meet y'all. Okay, we are ready to roll. Your next two presenters speaking on the topic of COVID and the workers' compensation claim are Melisa Zwilling, who is a shareholder with Carr Allison here in Birmingham. She is considered a national authority on Medicare Secondary Payer issues, especially in the area of Medicare Compliance. Melisa has refocused her passion for the law in providing a sound analysis of and guidance through coronavirus challenges in many areas affecting clients as their respective business operations return to work. In 2014 and 15, she was selected as one of Fortune magazine's women leaders in the law industry. Melisa was invited to Time magazine's list of the most influential women in America and Fortune's list of premier lawyers. She graduated from Athens State University magna cum laude, earning her degree in both business administration and management of technology. She obtained her law degree from the University of Alabama School of Law. She is raised in the country and continues to spend much of her free time outdoors with her daughter and her son. She can frequently be found playing golf, riding horses, or fishing. This is a really interesting next statement. After having a stroke at the age of 35, Melisa has spent the past several years as a volunteer and advocate for the American Heart and Stroke Associations. She tries to live every day to the fullest and looks for opportunities to make a positive difference in the lives of others. Brett Adair is also a shareholder at Carr Allison here in Birmingham and serves as chair of the firm's Employment Litigation Practice Group. Brett counsels clients on numerous federal employment matters, including Title VIII, age discrimination, Americans with Disabilities Acts, family and medical leave, and others. Brett is a member of the Alabama and Georgia state bars. He is admitted to practice before the United States Court of Appeals and federal district courts in Alabama, the Middle District Court of Georgia, and all state courts in Georgia. Brett is recognized as one of Birmingham's top attorneys in employment litigation by Birmingham Magazine. He was also selected for inclusion in the best lawyers in America in the area of employment law. Outside of work, Brett loves spending time with his family, participating in triathlons, riding a KTM dirt bike, and has coached his kids' soccer teams. Please welcome Melisa and Brett.
Good afternoon. We are the end, I almost said butt end, but that's probably not a nice thing to say. We are the end of a busy day, and I promise you one thing, you will not go to sleep, okay? Because I have more energy than, because I had like caramel popcorn for lunch with a Diet Coke, and I just had another Diet Coke, so I talk fast. Anyway, we have got a lot of material to cover. This morning, like y'all are getting the first information right here today. This morning, OSHA came out with the new emergency temporary standards for employers, mandating vaccinations for employees. Aren't y'all excited to hear about that? I know, y'all, I can feel it. So we're gonna be talking about that a little bit. I'm going to fly through information, and I can see the comments now. She talks too fast. But I'm doing that because there is so much to get through. I at least want to touch on some of the topics that you really, would be most interested in. The ETS was 490 pages.
That's right.
So I'm going to cover 490 pages plus an hour PowerPoint presentation on other issues in just a few minutes. All right, y'all ready? Yeah, and then we get to go drink after this. Okay. Okay, and I have to stand out here. I am clumsy as the day is long, so if I topple over, y'all don't laugh too loud. But I can't do this without seeing my slides. Okay, so we are going to cover all this stuff. Next, a lot of stuff. Okay, So on September the 9th, President Biden issued an executive order directing federal employees to become vaccinated. Also federal government contractors. Those were 2 executive orders. And I think, Brett, they changed the dates from November, gave them until January.
Yeah, they backed that up today, and it'll be in January. They gave federal contractors a little bit longer because there was some panic that was coming along with having to do it this month. So a little bit of freedom there, but and then we'll talk about that a little bit more. But today we're talking about non-federal contractors for the most part.
Yes. And let me mention, next week, Brett and I are going to do a webinar. And I have the link to our website page if any of you are interested in attending that webinar, where we're going to talk a little slower and cover this information a little bit more in depth for anybody who's interested in it. But the only exceptions for federal employees becoming vaccinated are, as you'll hear Brett talk about in a minute, with regard to regular employers, religious exemptions, or disabilities under the ADA. Next. In addition to those executive orders, President Biden directed OSHA to issue emergency temporary standards for employers who have a certain number of employees. And that standard was expected to mandate vaccinations or weekly testing and masking, and that's what came out today. There's already an ETS in place for healthcare providers. So if you're a healthcare provider or work with healthcare providers, there already is an ETS in place mandating vaccinations. Next. So emergency temporary standards are essentially, they are laws. It is a law, and it is deemed appropriate when there is a significant risk, in the government's opinion, of grave danger and harm to individuals unless they enact this law. It allows them to skip the legal process and the typical rulemaking processes. So, and it can take effect immediately. It took effect today. So that's what an ETS is if you're not familiar with that. Next. And it came out today. Next. This morning, I woke up, Brett and we were emailing like, oh my goodness, because we expected to have a little bit more time to deal with these issues. So employers with 100 or more employees are required to determine the vaccination status of every employee. They're expected to obtain proofs of vaccination, which means you're going to have to give up your vaccination card and let your employer have a copy of it, and maintain records and a roster of all employees' vaccination status. So every time you get a shot, you got to tell your employer, give them a copy of the card, and employers have to maintain records of all of that. Next. In addition, employees have to be directed to provide immediate notice to their employers if they test positive for COVID, or if they've been in contact with someone who is positive for COVID, and they cannot be allowed to return to the workplace until the criteria for allowing somebody to integrate back into the workplace have been met, and those are issued by the CDC. Next. Everyone who is not vaccinated must provide weekly negative test results. So they have to take a weekly test for COVID-19 every single week. That is no fun. That is no fun. Have y'all done that? The test? It is no fun, is it? It's not fun. Have I said that it's not fun at all? It hurts. Anyway, I'm a weenie. Okay, so also you have to wear a face covering. So masks that we thought were gone are not gone. Y'all, I threw them. This is so bad. I have my kids. I've got a 16-year-old and 11-year-old, and they go to school, and they were mandatory masks. And so when things started to look better, I threw those suckers away. We almost had a burning party because they're hard to breathe in. I'm claustrophobic, and my son is too. So we celebrated and we thought, oh, we're past this. It's good. It's awesome. And so no, you can't do that. So you have to get tested every single week and wear a mask if you are not vaccinated. Next. I did a webinar last week and a lot of people had a good question about, so how is this not a violation of privacy? Employers cannot disclose the vaccination status of their employees, but if you're making people wear a mask and they have to leave every week to go get testing, that's kind of obvious. Well, yeah, it just is. And it's not a violation, people, because they said it's not a violation. And it's just the way it is. Next. Right, we like that. It's just because I said so. I know. My kids don't like it either. Okay, so these are some of the facts that came out today in that 490-page document. Questions that I got, like tons of questions last week from the webinar, and that Brett gets all the time about vaccinations and protocols and policies and such. So employers are not required to pay for the weekly testing. And if you have had to have testing done and you weren't showing symptoms, you had to have testing for work, insurance doesn't cover that unless you've been exposed to someone knowingly or unless you're showing symptoms. So if insurance is not going to cover it and your employer's not going to cover it, that means that employees are going to bear the burden of paying full prices for getting COVID-19 testing, which also, were you a little bit surprised by that?
Yeah, and obviously, I think that's a hammer that the government's using to try to force the vaccination on folks that can't afford weekly testing. But just a real quick pointer, if you're at the AFC or American Family Care getting tested, just make sure the tester says that I was in close contact. Because if you think about it, with the way that they're describing COVID, we've all been in close contact with somebody with COVID. And so it's not dishonest, but I don't think it's fair to push the cost of this weekly testing off on employees. But that's what it is right now. And I don't see that changing. And there's some other things that I think will be a real incentive. It's meant to be a hammer for employees to make them get vaccinated. You don't have to give off any paid time if someone gets COVID. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So.
All right, so employers are also not required to pay for face coverings, which is kind of interesting. Employers must comply with provisions of this ETS immediately. It's effective immediately. They have to have in place a mandatory COVID vaccination or testing/mask wearing policy before December the 4th, and the actual testing process has to be in place by January the 4th or 5th.
I think it's 4th. Yeah.
Okay. And so it's happening really, really fast. And yeah, I just noticed that there is a copy of the OSHA has helped employers out in this respect. They have published a copy of a policy template for the mandatory vaccination policy, or for the mandatory, for those who choose not to do that, who instead do the weekly testing. There is a policy, and it is pages and pages and pages and pages. It's like really long.
Yeah.
And it's so, the language of it is like, because vaccinations are so helpful. I mean, you could just see like, they're so cheery and so happy. And so it's really kind of amusing. But there are policies online that you can use as employers. Next. There are exceptions to the mandatory vaccination policy that if an employer decides to have a mandatory vaccination policy, they can allow exceptions for vaccination in these situations. If there is an individual whose the vaccination is medically contraindicated, and that's funny because I did have a stroke when I was 35, and I'm fine, obviously, thank God. And but the vaccine, like I'm at the very serious high risk of death from the COVID vaccine. I didn't know it at the time. So I guess I'm really lucky, but like there are a lot of people who have medical conditions who are at a serious and the high serious risk of high risk of serious injuries or illness or death. So those people do not have to become vaccinated, but I already am, so oh well. Those for whom medical necessity requires a delay, if they're going to have a procedure done or something like that. And two of the things that Brett are going to talk about, those who qualify for accommodations under the federal employment laws, whether it's a sincerely held religious belief or if it's a disability that qualifies under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So companies who have fewer than 100 employees might be like, whew, thank God. However, OSHA has been very, very clear that there is still the general duty clause that requires employers to provide a safe work environment for their employees that's not likely to cause death or serious injury. And so the general duty clause still applies to all employers. And how OSHA will govern that, will implement that, and remains to be seen. However, they have issued citations to healthcare providers. Mm-hmm. They've enhanced the whistleblower provisions to allow the government to fine companies for not complying with just the general duty clause. Next. This is expected to impact over 80 million workers, and 29% of the current workforce is not vaccinated. And 83% of that 29% say they have absolutely no intentions of becoming vaccinated. In the longer program that we do just on employment laws, it's broken down into demographics, and you can see which groups of people really are just like, ain't gonna happen. And so that is really, really interesting to look at and consider. Next. Penalties. Ouch. Let me back up and say, because on this webinar, it's so funny. I don't express my opinion. I bet y'all couldn't tell what my true opinion is on these issues, because it's not my place to tell you what my opinion is. You don't really care. But I got emails from people, both sides, like, I can't believe clearly your agenda is this. I'm like, no, not even. And I got that on both sides. And so I am not expressing my opinion, any comments. I'll make comments both ways, to be honest with you. So there, with that, let me make sure that that is said. The penalties for violating this ETS. Holy cow. Okay, holy cow. Companies will be fined. The legislation itself says $13,600 for each violation. However, Brett dug through, because he's as exciting as I am, he the 2,465-page reconciliation bill to discover that there is a provision in there that will raise the penalties for OSHA violations that could, for anything deemed serious that could cause grave harm or injury to someone, raise the penalty for the first violation to $70,000. $70,000, y'all. That is a lot of money. And for those who have willful or repeat violations, $700,000. I don't know any company in this country that can withstand a whole lot of those. I mean, that is a ton of money. So you can see they are not playing. Like Brett said a minute ago, Hammer, I think so much of this is really like, we said, do it, you will do it, or pay $70,000 or $700,000. And so this is serious business. And the fact today, was it today that Doug Parker was confirmed, or yesterday? Was confirmed?
Yeah, he's in the middle of being confirmed, or has been confirmed, and he has taken over OSHA now. So I think that signals where OSHA is going right now.
Because he used to run California's OSHA program.
Yeah.
Y'all get it. Yeah. Oh, I mean, wow, we know what to expect. So this is not, I mean, if you don't like vaccines, you don't think that this is not headed in a place that you're going to be happy. I'll just say that. And if you're in favor of vaccines, you'll be like, yeah, because it's, yeah, that's recorded. Oh God. Yeah, next. So the FAQs, y'all know, I know half of you guys are sitting out there and people fussed at me on the webinar. They didn't really fuss, y'all, people are really nice. But they noted that I did not discuss all of the legal challenges that could possibly be asserted against this legislation. Well, the reason why I didn't do that is because it would just be, you know, my opinions again, and who really cares about that? But my response to those people was, I didn't do it because of the federal supremacy, and you know the fact that federal law trumps a conflicting state law, right? If there's a conflicting state law and it's in, you know, then it goes bye-bye. It is not valid. It's not effective. And so the first FAQ that OSHA issued this morning in response to the publication of that 490-page document, the FAQs are like 47 pages. But was that lawsuits challenging the mandate that have already been filed are just kind of whatever, because federal supremacy will preempt all of them. And it doesn't matter what, you know, the state governors and the states, and right now we're looking at all the states that are challenging this, filing a lawsuit that'll go straight to federal court. It doesn't matter because they're saying that this is federal supremacy issue. It trumps. We don't care that the states don't want to have to force employers to mandate vaccination or weekly testing. We don't care because we don't have to care because they're federal government and this is a federal law. And so you can challenge it all day long, but too bad, so sad. That's the position. The very first FAQ that they listed said that. So that kind of gives you an idea of where they're coming from. But lawsuits have already been filed and more are in the process of being filed. So we'll see where that goes, but I wouldn't, you know, hang your hat too heavy on, you know, lawsuits jumping in and saving the day. Next. some of the difficulties, and I think it's almost Brett's time to talk so I can breathe, because I haven't breathed in the last 10 minutes, is that the availability of testing sites. Y'all, where are all these people going to get their tests if they have to go every single week to get tested? I mean, when we had, I started traveling a few months ago, and coming back from a conference, I felt kind of crummy. And so I'm like, I need to get tested. It was during when the Delta variant first came out and everybody was getting sick. And so it was hard. It took me over a week to find a testing site where I could even get tested. And so, I mean, people who have to provide negative test results every week before, they're like, I don't know where they're going to get tested. So that's a problem. The amount of the supplies necessary and the personnel, because everybody's got a workforce shortage now. So trying to find people to do that. Response time for test results, unless you get the rapid test, that's a problem. And people had asked me on the webinar about the home tests. I personally like those. I think they're awesome. However, I do think there's going to be an issue, and I have not seen anything in the 490-page document about whether the home tests are appropriate, but you can't prove that the person who said they took it, it's at home and they could their dog pee on it or something, tested that. You just never know, right? So I don't know that the home tests are going to be a great.
And they did announce. I did have a little more time to read today while Melissa was getting these slides ready. They are saying that home tests are not appropriate if you're letting them take them at home. Now, if they want to come in and you have somebody dedicated at work that'll watch you swab the nose and read the test after 15 minutes, that'll be appropriate. But the home test, as far as I can tell, I hadn't seen the price on them, but they're, if they're going to charge a premium on it, I just don't see that as a good option for employees. But are we going to send our employees to AFC every week to get them tested? Another question. The other problem I see with this, as far as difficulty, is when is this going to stop? There's not a sunset provision on this. Are we going to keep testing every week for 2022 at least, I imagine? But is it going into 23 and 24? I guess it depends on the next variant or where things go. Mm-hmm. But as far as how this is going to disrupt my clients and your operations, I think this is pretty drastic. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. Yep.
The other issue, time off for employees to be tested, like decreased productivity, because they'll be out being tested and not be there to do the work. Next.
You get to breathe.
I get to breathe. All right.
So that's 490 pages that she just summarized in about 10 minutes. So that was impressive. I almost printed it to bring it to show it to everybody, because when they issued ETS for healthcare, you guys may have read some of that. It was a lot of pages, but it wasn't anywhere near 490 pages. And so I can imagine a lot of, interns and in pages and other senators up in DC spent every waking hour writing this for the past, 3 or 4 months since Joe Biden announced the mandate. We've always had some exceptions to these rules. So go ahead to the next slide. And I want to talk about them for a minute, because I think you'll start seeing these exceptions coming out a little bit more often. Does anyone in the audience have responsibility for reviewing requests for exemptions from the mandate if you have a mandate right now? All right. I won't ask you if you've submitted one yourself. We've seen some with our clients where we'll get a letter from the church, and the letter says, I attend this church and my church supports me in my decision not to get vaccinated. And, that was just kind of testing the waters. I think employees just didn't know what to do. And so they submit these fairly generic letters from a church that was legitimate, but it didn't have what the religious belief was, or the basis, or how it impacted their religious belief. I don't think that the EEOC historically has wanted employers to really test an employee's sincerely held religious beliefs. So I think the EEOC is going to be a little bit at odds with OSHA over this. I think if OSHA had their way right now, they'd probably have written that exception out of the rules, but that was not permitted. So right now, the only exceptions to getting tested or going through the weekly testing or actually just getting vaccinated, is a sincerely held religious belief or a condition that qualifies as a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have forms available if anyone in the audience or online would like those. But basically, if you have an employee that comes to you and says, I cannot take the vaccine because of X, Y, and Z, we need to give them a form to fill out to lay out in writing for us to determine what those beliefs are, what that disability is. And if it's a disability or a religious belief, it needs to be something that is safeguarded within the HR arena and not shared with all employees, obviously. if I have a disability or if Melissa had a disability that she didn't want everybody to know about, she just wants to tell the HR professional about that. It's probably not regularly shared with you in the audience, but I wanted to point that out. There are online sources now apparently where you could download forms for religious beliefs or for disabilities. I wouldn't suggest using one of those forms. So historically, basically all an employee had to do is say, well, I have to wear this headband or I have to wear dreadlocks because I have a religious belief that requires this. It's part of my faith. And that was enough. And we had to work or to accommodate that belief. I think in this particular instance, there's going to have to be more detail. I've seen some pretty detailed religious exemptions so far in the healthcare world. And some folks are turning it into a cottage industry. So I don't think OSHA really intended that, but that's where we're going. Once that's shown, once you provide that excuse, whether it's religion or disability, the employer has a duty to talk about reasonable accommodation. And then you can get into the whole issue of whether, well, I can't accommodate you because it's an undue hardship on me. I don't think we want to get into that today. It'd take a couple of hours, but basically the accommodations can be let this person work from home, separate them from everybody else, make them wear more onerous personal protective equipment. Things that are basically going to put a big scarlet letter on their forehead, if you ask me. It's going to ostracize them from others in the workforce. But that's what we're having to look at. I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm not anti-OSHA. But this mandate, I think, presents a world of problems for my clients. And there was a lawsuit filed today by the state of Florida that I think Alabama and Georgia are going to join. There was a lawsuit filed by a private employer in Virginia over this mandate. And so it's going straight to the Court of Appeals. It's skipping the district court level because OSHA is involved. So I think we're going to get some injunctions or rulings on injunctions probably within the next week or two, because obviously we only have until December 4th to put this in place. So I think this is going to work its way up quickly. And obviously I think it's headed to the Supreme Court. It's not going to stop at the circuit court level because the Ninth Circuit out in California is not going to rule the same way the 11th Circuit is going to rule on this. So there's going to be a circuit conflict. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. And if you're a nerd like me, you'll be watching that. But I think it affects all of us. And I've read some things online. What's next? Are they going to start requiring or issuing mandates in the healthcare field that employees within the healthcare field that are patient facing, are they going to have show proof that their family's vaccinated too, because they're around their family every day, right? So I don't know if that's going to happen. I think that's probably an extreme step that the government would take, but it's going to be interesting to see where the line is drawn. Okay, so Title VII, we went, let's see. I'm kind of skipping around a little bit here, not keeping the slides. So the one that says sincerity of belief, there we go. It's largely a matter of individual credibility. I mean, again, do we want to be in the business of deciding whether or not Brett's a Baptist or Brett's a Presbyterian or Melissa's, a Mormon? I just don't see employers wanting to get into that battle, but obviously you have to go through the steps of determining whether or not it's sincerely held religious belief. Let's skip forward a few minutes because I want to get to the workers' comp portion of the state, the PowerPoint. There's an undue hardship slide that I'm going to skip over here, but we can share this slideshow with you or we can talk to you in more detail about it. But because of the timing today, we have about 30 minutes left. I want to kind of keep going here. Reasonable accommodations can include remote working, telework from home. The testing requirement is going to be basically, if you come to work 1 day a week, you're going to have to show your employer that you get tested every week. If you're teleworking, you're working from home, or you work outside only, you're going to be able to skip that weekly testing requirement. All right, so let's talk about the ADA disability that prevents vaccination. It used to be that a disability had to be something basically pretty tangible, that the EEOC would define it as something that everyone thinks of as a disability. Now, pretty much anything outside of a common cold is considered a disability under the Act, or can be. So don't just take a shortened view of your employees coming to you and saying, I have a disability or I have a health condition. Most of us in the audience, and myself included, are not doctors. We shouldn't substitute our judgment for the doctors. With a religious belief, you can have a letter from the church perhaps, or a letter from the employee about the belief, but in a disability context, you're probably going to have a letter from a doctor or a healthcare provider. Yes, sure. Yeah, and just so the question is clear, or for everybody to hear, what if you have a doctor that's basically afraid to put in writing that I don't think this patient should get a vaccine? I have heard anecdotally, not directly from doctors and from the healthcare field, that if doctors are providing those excuses or taking a stance against the vaccine, that they risk losing, I don't know if it's Medicare reimbursement or Medicare patients, or so there's pressure on that field as well to be pro-vaccine. But I'm hoping it doesn't carry over into, although it makes sense to me that it would, that a doctor just isn't going to make a widespread practice of saying this disability could affect your condition of diabetes, or if you have rheumatoid arthritis, you shouldn't take the vaccine. I haven't seen that, but I'm hoping that wouldn't carry over there. I do think you're going to see doctors very, very, very hesitant to take any kind of stated position against vaccines. Now, does that mean they wouldn't take the position for minors, children that are 5 to 18? We're seeing a lot of talk right now that 1 or 2 of the drugs has been approved for minors and for children. And I think California just passed a regulation, maybe it was San Francisco, passed a regulation that if you're 5 years old or older and you're not vaccinated, you cannot come in businesses within San Francisco. Basically, your parents have to keep you out of the business. Again, California's a little extreme. I get to use them as a guinea pig in a kind of a punching bag all the time, and I appreciate them for that. If you have businesses or offices in California, I apologize. But that's a good question. I think that it's yet to be seen whether or not doctors are going to sign those. I'm probably pretty lucky. I have a relationship with my doctor, and if I tell them something and there's a basis for it, they'll probably sign something that will help me in that regard. That's probably not true of a lot of folks. You're not on a first name basis with your doctor. It takes you 3 weeks to get in with your doctor. I think that's going to be a real problem folks are going to face. So good question. And please, I didn't say this at the beginning, interrupt me. We can get questions online too from the folks that are watching online. And so please interrupt me. This is an area that it's a moving target. Melissa and I laugh all the time about this. This PowerPoint we'd already set it like Tuesday of this week, and we had to change it today because of this. And we'll have to change it tomorrow too, because there'll be new lawsuits filed or a court ruling issued. In the healthcare field, pretty much right now,
We've had a ton come online. I just haven't interrupted you, but if either you or Melissa could watch the chat, because it is absolutely blowing up insane.
That's what happened after I did the webinar last week. There were 600 people on the webinar, which was like, oh my God. And those of you who watch my webinars, isn't my dog cute? Oh, she's fabulous. And if you haven't watched a webinar, you have to, just to see my French Bulldog puppy. So yeah, like so many, it took me 2 days to get through and answer all the questions. So maybe we could I will speed through like lightning the rest of them, and then we could spend the last few minutes answering questions if that works for everybody.
And I got off a little point there, again, off track as far as I know. This is a workers' compensation talk, but this is obviously hitting 80 million private employees is what the goal of this is to hit. So I think it's obviously something that it's not affecting you directly, it's affecting somebody you know. And so, and obviously Melissa and I are eating and sleeping and drinking this stuff right now, because my practice 2 years ago was probably 10% OSHA. Right now, it's 90% OSHA, and I don't expect that to change. I'm grateful that I have a practice that can, but I wish this would just simply go away. And so we're all sick of it, and I know y'all are too. Go ahead.
And this is what happened with Medicare Compliance when it first came out. It's like I lived it and I read all this stuff, and I get to do it again with this. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to talk about some workers' compensation issues. Next. All right. Compensability of, go back one. Okay. And under one more forward. Trying to trick me here. Okay. So in order to be compensable in most states, an injury has to be, or injury or disease has to be occupational, meaning that it arose out of and in the course and scope of your employment. There has to be, to meet that, there has to be a causal connection between the injury and the treatment, and which you can imagine with COVID is really difficult to prove because it's so contagious, and we're, people who go anywhere are at risk of being infected with that. There is consideration given to the time, the place, and the circumstances surrounding the contraction of the illness or injury. Next. Workers' compensation does not cover things that are usually contagious, such as the flu, which we can kind of see is sort of like COVID-19. You would think it's airborne and it's very, contagious. However, workers' compensation does not cover that type of an illness. The possibility that someone suffered or they had caught something at work is not sufficient to establish the causations that's needed and the proof that's needed to support a workers' compensation claim. Next slide.
Melissa, before you go forward, there are a lot of things popping up in the chat box and some Q&As that I don't think we could make rational sense of and talk and keep it kind of flowing right now. But what we'll do is we'll finish our slideshow and then just Melissa and I'll here just kind of wing it for questions, and we'll try to do our best to keep up. But please keep sending those in, and then we'll do our best. We only have an hour.
If we could get a copy of the questions afterwards, we can respond to by email if we don't get a chance to
That's right.
to cover all of them. Workers' compensation would, however, generally cover a condition that is considered an occupational hazard for those in the healthcare industry, first responders, those sort of people. They are at more of a risk of exposure to COVID-19, and those claims are considered to be occupational hazards and occupational diseases that would most likely be covered under workers' compensation. There are other, next slide. There's a lot of state legislation that 9 states last year passed legislation, and then more states were added to that legislation, creating a presumption of work relatedness for certain categories of people, those first responders, those healthcare providers. There's a presumption that if those people got COVID-19, it was assumed to be a work-related injury and it was compensable under workers' compensation. Alabama has not joined this list of states who have enacted presumption legislation, and I kind of doubt that they will. But there are several other states, in addition to the now 17, that have enacted legislation creating that presumption of work-relatedness. When there is a presumption that COVID-19 is work-related, that shifts the burden to the employer to prove that it was not, that it could not have arisen out of the work environment, which you really just can't do with COVID-19 for all those people who are first responders or in the healthcare industry. Next. There is some talk among some states in expanding that presumption litigation, or the presumption of work-relatedness to school employees, grocery store workers, transportation workers, those other people who are kind of in the front lines and who have been deemed to be essential workers. So I suspect we may be seeing more of that going forward. Next. To rebut that presumption under workers' compensation, you would have to inquire about the employee's off-duty activities, like where you been, who you been with, kind of stuff, which people really don't like to have to answer. Those are some of the questions that you have to ask in order to rebut that presumption of work-relatedness. If they have had family members or friends who've been infected with COVID-19, or looking at the workplace, and if you have got a group of people working in a certain area and you've got 1 or 2 people infected, you have to pretty much assume that that was an occupational illness and would be compensable. Next. So the truth is that most workers' compensation claims for COVID-19 have been denied, and rightfully so, in the state of Alabama. So we've actually gotten a question from some insurers and TPAs whether they can just kind of like stamp those all as denied. And the answer is no, 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 don't do that. Because, yeah, they're probably going to be denied under Alabama unless it falls into one of those occupational hazards. But there are other laws and other problems that you will create if you just rubber stamp those without investigating. You got a duty to investigate those claims, and you can't just, I know what the result's going to be, denied. You can't do that. So make sure you are actually investigating, conduct some sort of investigation around any claim for workers' compensation COVID-19 benefits. Even if you're positive it's going to be denied, don't just rubber stamp it denied, because that really will create problems for you in other areas of the law, and you don't want to go there. Next. Side effects of the vaccine. If an employer mandates vaccination, which the government is truly trying to get everyone to do, then you are responsible as an employer. You will be responsible for the side effects that someone suffers from that vaccine. if you strongly encourage that. And I noticed that the language in the suggested policy from OSHA for those employers who are not mandating the vaccine, but are instead mandating weekly testing or masks, says we strongly recommend that you become vaccinated. So if you strongly recommend that your employees become vaccinated and they get to have adverse side effects from COVID-19, probably going to be responsible for that as well.
So if someone has an underlying health condition, stroke, diabetes, whatever it might be, hypertension, they get the vaccine and then they go to ICU because of the vaccine, that's covered under the
Yes. Yeah, that's not really that's not really part of the legal analysis. The fact that the employer didn't really want to mandate it, but they had to, that wouldn't really help them in a legal argument over whether they're responsible for something or not.
So employers are going to be responsible for any adverse effect, even though it's ultimately the government who is responsible. Is that where we are?
Are you going to throw something at me if I answer that question? Because if you are, I'm not going to answer it. Or I'm going to let Brett answer it.
That's where we are.
That's where we are.
I think so.
I know, right?
Doesn't that alarm you more than the fire themselves?
I'm not going to express my personal opinions. Let me make
We have-
that clear. Brett, you want to?
No, we have a question in the back here, I think.
Okay.
I'm not skipping the question.
Yeah, next slide, let me make sure. I
Hang on,
think
we
we're
got-
almost at the end.
Hang on, we got somebody want to raise a hand in the back.
Long haul cases? Yes.
The last question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The last question was, even if the only reason why the employers have mandated vaccinations is because the government's making them do it, or the government has laid it out where they have to do that, or they have issues, are they still responsible for the adverse side effects that employees suffer when they didn't want to enact this mandate requiring vaccination anyway? And the answer is yes.
Yep.
So what's really to make y'all, this is great. I know, right? Y'all should watch our webinar next week. Okay, I'm gonna give you the link in just a minute. Watch the webinar next week. It'll be awesome. Okay, so am I gonna have what?
Opinions on the webinar.
I refuse to state my opinion.
I will. Yeah, I'll
He
say mine.
does.
Yeah.
He does. And y'all, at the beginning of the webinars, I always announce, okay, so I got COVID right in the very beginning. I was on a work trip to Arizona, and I came back the 14th. I felt like crap. And then the country shut down March the 16th. It was March the 14th. Government shut down March the 16th because of COVID. So I got to experience it right in the beginning, and I've been vaccinated. This man, on the other hand, is as healthy as a freaking horse. He never gets sick. And I mean, he did get it. He's got the antibodies.
I had it last Labor Day weekend, which is a year ago, September. And then I tested for antibodies in July and still had antibodies. I don't know what the numbers were. And I don't know if that prevents me from getting it again, but I think that's the standard that was just issued today says that there's not enough scientific evidence that antibodies that are natural would provide the same protection that the vaccine would provide. And so that's why they're not even going to put that into the standard. That should be something an employer should consider.
Yeah.
So again,
so you got, from on the webinar, you
Yeah.
get perspective from both vax
Yeah.
and not vax. So we try to make it even, right?
that's right. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Balance is good. Long haul cases is something that that I would be more concerned about than just the adverse effects that you're having, because long haulers, y'all know what that is? Like long haulers, these people who have COVID and they recover, talk about difficulty in proving something. Oh my gosh. So long haulers are the long-term symptoms that people have after they recover. I told you wouldn't fall asleep, didn't I? Anybody asleep? No, I knew it. Y'all on the phone, on the webinar don't count it because I can't see. You might be in your comfy pajamas on your sofa. So these long-term effects can include fatigue. Who the heck is not fatigued every single day? Seriously. Chest pain, shortness of breath, joint or muscle pain, difficulty concentrating. Yeah, I got all those. So they can last indefinitely, but this is a serious thing. Next slide. This is a serious thing. Long haulers, and like the problem in workers' compensation is not, in my humble, here's an opinion, opinion, my humble opinion, the problem is not so much going to be the initial adverse side effects for a lot of people, because you feel like crap for a couple of weeks, and you may have some symptoms. But the problem in workers' compensation is going to be these long haul cases, because there's no known treatment for it. It's so new, and they are so expansive, and like, that's a problem. Like, if you end up having to be responsible for the side effects, and the side effects turn into long hauler syndrome and they last forever, that's a problem. Like, that is, in my opinion, the most alarming situation in the workers' compensation context to be concerned about. Next. Yeah, okay, next. Resources, in case y'all want to read some stuff. This is some real interesting reading here. But next, this is the most important slide. Y'all got a pen? If you want to hear our opinions, maybe not. If you want to hear more about like all this stuff, and once we actually get a chance to read that 490-page document and digest the whole thing and provide information about it, this website, it's our Medicare Compliance website. It has a list of all of our the free continuing education webinars that we have. That will have a link to the webinar that Brett and I are giving next week to discuss these issues more in detail.
That's next Thursday at 10 a.m., I think.
Next Thursday at 10 a.m. And I apologize, when I said that, I did not realize it was Veterans Day. But it'll be recorded, and we will be able to provide that to people afterwards. All right, we're going to run through some questions.
We have some questions out in the audience too, and then some online. Go ahead.
Under that mandate, that you have to get the vaccine, are they also employees have to get tested? Is there a testing provision for how long their antibodies last, how they be vaccinated?
Not stated in the ETS.
No, what they said though is if you have somebody that tests positive for COVID-19 and they come back to work, you can't require them to be tested for 90 days. And so I guess that's because the test will keep hitting positive even though they don't show any symptoms, because they just had COVID. But as far as antibodies, and it does not take that into consideration at all.
The CDC has some timelines about when you can return to work after a positive test, but that's not real helpful in that respect.
Yeah.
It's easy. It's Carr Allison MSA for Medicare Subside. CarrAllisonMSA.com/webinars. Or just go to Carr Allison MSA and you can get to the webinars page, and it has a list. And if y'all need any more CEs, we got tons of them for the rest of this year. I'm doing an ethics one again. So.
All right, so
okay.
Let's go through a few questions. There's a question right here real quick.
Oh.
About the Florida challenge, I haven't read through it all, but it seems like it's challenging basically the standing of OSHA to implement this rule, plus the emergency nature. Is this the end game to tee up a 10th Amendment challenge?
Oh gosh, great question. Thank you for reminding me that. The question is the Florida lawsuit probably is going to be a 10th Amendment challenge, and that's probably above my pay grade. What I'm waiting to see is not really the state's challenges; it's more the private employers' challenges to see what arguments they make.
I agree.
We'll see. I'm glad that.
The states have got standing to raise that. That's why I'm saying, where does the state say that?
Right. Whether the federal government has the power to tell the state, shut up, we're telling you what to do, and we preempt you. I think that's going to be their main argument.
This
for the
is
state.
states' rights to, this is a big deal. This is probably like the most biggest. Yeah, the biggest. Like, this is a big deal. Like, this is a crazy important issue. Like, for our individual freedoms and rights versus the government's ability. Like, this is a big deal. Like, seriously big deal. And the outcome of this is like, it is very impactful. It's well beyond the COVID extent. One of the questions up there I saw, somebody had, I got this question a lot after the webinar, so let me answer it. When in determining the 100 employees, does that include remote workers? Does that include part-time people? It includes everybody. Everybody at any time is included in determining whether that 100 employee level is met or not. So they intend for this to apply to as
And a related question to that, and I'll come back to a related question is, are folks that are fully remote exempt from the vaccine mandate and weekly testing?
No.
If you're fully remote, I think you're counted for the 100 employee test, but you are yourself probably exempt from weekly testing.
You're not.
You're not.
You're not.
All right, I thought I read that different. Well, yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Unless they change it. I know, right?
Yeah.
I actually read that because I'm remote. Like, I work remotely.
Interesting. All right, there's a question here that I ignored. Sorry. The question was, on the 100 employee count, does it count full and part-time employees? It does, in any combination.
This was one of the interesting things because, people who work outside, exclusively outdoor, like landscape people, the example that OSHA gave was that if you have 150 employees and 145 of those work exclusively outside, does that 145 count towards your 100? The answer was yes, that counts towards your 100. Although those people would be exempt from the vaccine requirement because they're exclusively outdoors and they don't come in contact with other people. So they want everybody thrown in there to be counted.
So do contract employees, say someone that has 105 employees and they contract them?
Independent contractors do not count.
Are you
in
talking
that
about,
100.
all right, so the question was, do contracted employees count towards that? Yeah.
Let's say someone has 100 employees, W-2, they change them all contracts in 99.
Then they do not count. The only employees in the FAQs, the only list of employees that are excluded are independent contractors. So if there's an independent contractor, they do not count towards that. And I suspect you're getting onto something there. I suspect a lot more people will become 1099 employees.
And watch that, because if it becomes a trend, OSHA will change that rule.
Yes, they will. Yes,
so,
they will.
Yeah. There was a question that, well, that's right. That's a good point. So one of the questions that came up and went down for Melissa is, have there been any contested claims of denying COVID compensability that have gone to trial, and what was the outcome?
Jeremy, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah.
Have there been any cases tried that with the compensability of COVID-19 has been challenged, and what's the outcome? Like, I know in other states there has been, but yeah.
David, Ray, you know of any that have tried in Alabama that are COVID cases? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen any either. Yeah, on the compensability. But in Alabama, it's a pretty easy issue. If it's just a straight up COVID and there's not like occupational hazards, it's pretty easy. You're like denied, even though you got to investigate. But I don't know of any that have been reported either. In other states, yes, but not here.
All right, so about 8 more minutes of time before we have to shut down, and obviously we're open for any questions. I really do try to provide both sides of the question. Obviously, y'all know kind of where I stand on some things, but for my clients, it's important to know what they're required to do and what they can do and I don't tell them what they should do. That's unfortunately not my decision. We all have family members or friends that have been impacted by this. It is an awful, awful disease. And so my comments up here about OSHA or the mandate, I hope you don't take that to mean that I take it too lightly. I don't. But we're here to answer any questions. Melissa and I'll hang around for a little bit longer. I don't know if there's any current questions online right now that we need to address that we haven't yet, but can you pull up the Q&A real quick to see if there's any on there?
Yeah.
That's the chat right now. There's
Will employers be responsible for the long-term health effects if they accept the original COVID claim? Yes. Next.
Yep. That's pretty simple answer. Yeah.
Told y'all me fast. Oh, is that it? Okay. Awesome.
Well, we finished a few minutes early. We'll hang around again and talk to anybody if y'all have questions y'all think of or want to ask offline. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
I'll just turn this off.
Wow, that was really, really an interesting topic. Thanks, Melissa and Brett, for your excellent presentation. So I do have some announcements to make. First of all, we'll start back here in the morning at 8 o'clock in this room. For those of you on Zoom, there's a separate invite for tomorrow. And breakfast is going to be served at 7 o'clock in the morning. I think it was incorrect on the printed documents, but it will be 7 o'clock out there in the exhibit hall. And new adjuster training is also tomorrow with a separate Zoom invite for those of you who want to participate with that. Tracy Stallings and attorney David Ray are going to take care of that for you. That'll be in a different room somewhere on site. We just want to thank you for your participation on Zoom and here in the live attendance today. It was really great. I want to thank you for allowing me to serve as your moderator today. And Shannon mentioned earlier today when we started about the beneficiary for tonight's auction. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about STAIR because I'm passionate about it, as was Randy Thomas. And it's certainly a tribute to him and to me that the association chose STAIR as their beneficiary. STAIR stands for Start the Adventures in Reading. And it's an after-school program for underserved youth, usually second graders, who need one-on-one tutors to help them improve their reading skills and a boost in their self-esteem. Generally, these programs are taking place in churches around town with college age and adult volunteers who work with these children and provide amazing results. And the theory is that if they're able to leave the second grade reading on their level, that they will more than likely graduate on time. And become contributing members of their communities. So think about all that this evening as you participate in the auction, because each of the exhibitors are going to have some fantastic items that you can bid on. And then somebody's going to be pulling that cart of liquor around it. I hope I win. That's going to be a nice little chance to also donate some money. Thank y'all very much. Oh, I almost lost it.
Hey, one more.
Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to mention, we have a lost item. If anybody happens to see a silver ring with sapphires and diamonds on it, please bring it to the registration desk. Thank you. Y'all enjoy the reception tonight.